ladies, welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Sierra Renee, with half a decade of experience building brands, doing online marketing, and creating futuristic but humanistic strategies for female creatives. If you want the latest updates on tech news, success stories from other women, and personal business lessons, go ahead and press that subscribe button. Thank you to all of those who have been supporting the new channel. We do have a podcast sponsor that will have her ad placed in the video soon enough, so shout out to her. Let's get into this episode. Today, I'm going to spill the beans on something that a lot of female entrepreneurs go through. I have vividly spoken about it before on my channel, but there's something about also infusing my stories that adds that special X factor, if you guys get what I mean. It's one thing to talk about a topic, and it's another thing to have it hit home because someone in the same industry or sphere or bubble has dealt with it. I want to be very clear as to what my goal is by releasing this episode. I find relief in joy and humor, so we're probably going to laugh about this. But furthermore, one of my goals this year is to find a strategic way to share what goes on behind the scenes in freelancing or working in spaces like marketing. One of my colleagues, who's a lot older and more experienced, gave me the advice of taking an emotionally intelligent approach. In other words, find an outlet to express the wisdom from these situations in a way that can also help others. One of my core values has always been transparency, no matter what. Still, as time has gone on, I have learned that having tact means skillfully expressing oneself while finding the appropriate places to do so. It also takes me a long time to get to the point where I want to dive into something that involves things like vulnerability, especially if it's a little bit too vulnerable. But I feel like that's what the world needs right now. I do think about the other person despite them not treating me well. That's just about having basic empathy as a human being. I also want to note that there isn't a level of victimhood here because I definitely had a responsibility to uphold my own beliefs and boundaries, to which I did not. However, when we have businesses to run, we do have to think about protecting what we have built. I want anyone listening right now to know that it's okay to share your stories, but with an element of consideration. I would also like to clarify that the goal isn't to clap back, and run this woman's name through the dirt. It's to incite a dialogue that is often hidden in Facebook or Reddit threads filled with tears about being paid poorly, treated poorly, and devalued in the online sector. In every industry right now, we're hearing echoes of people having to fight to be paid what they're worth. Taraji P. Henson has been one of the main figures in the media to speak about pay disparities. This doesn't just happen to big actors or actresses, but everyday business owners as well. We can all work to prevent or mitigate this kind of behavior if we just speak up about it and implement precautions. This is what I would like to highlight in this piece of content today. In the past, I have approached business with a wide open heart. You guys know this about me, and to some, this will be viewed as a mistake. To others, that's exactly how you're supposed to deal with people. I work contractually, as many of you guys do. And if you follow me on Facebook, perhaps you've seen a post in regards to a project I was working on, which had to be canceled due to not being compensated fully. I'm not sure how to share these receipts I got, but I can if that's what y'all want, okay? But more importantly, I walked away not pursuing legal action, moving forward, and deciding not to collaborate with the client in question, despite their desire to pause our agreement until she could pay again. I want you guys to remember that statement. This in itself showcases not a lack of dissatisfaction, but probably an inability to pay. And if we aren't careful, we can internalize these projections and allow them to plague us in more ways than one. My belief is that money can shift people's morality, and I'm going to remain neutral in my perspective because the measures we resort to in times such as these can show up in a range of ways for different people, right? Who am I to judge? So I met this woman who was married and had a family. She reached out to me in regards to my services. She wanted to incorporate more content strategy and structure into her routine. She began to put herself out there online, but she wasn't having any luck. She needed an entire brand identity, a website, and a few other things. She strongly felt that I was the woman for the job. My first mistake was beginning to work with leniency. I started the work relationship with a sense of flexibility. I have since learned that it sets the tone for a collaboration that might lack a backbone. Further into the collaboration, when she could not show up for a meeting because one of her kids' activities clashed with our schedule, or I had an obligation that ate into our time together, we basked in that flexibility. For those who may feel the urge to do this, try not to. As a woman who handles her business, you've got to hold yourself and your clients fully accountable. Going forward, considering the fact that she had a lot of obligations, I would often be patient with her, paying me as a courtesy. This is also something that I no longer do, honey. While the details of this woman's income isn't important because that isn't what we're here for, I knew the payment that I received was based off of a fixed frequency, meaning I was being paid based off of a specific arrangement that she had, which was supposed to come like clockwork. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. And this led to an imbalance on my end because while I understood her situation, I also had bills to pay just like her. This is why I firmly stand on the principle of stay firm in your pricing and do not budge. I'm always repeating it because I wanted to stick for those who follow my content. The next thing we'll address is allowing personal issues to seep into our work, because not everyone is your friend when it comes to offering services. You have to be mindful that when you have something to offer that people can benefit from, you can't afford to lack discernment. I learned that lesson from this situation and other occurrences throughout my career. This woman used the word friend a lot and really incorporated language that disarmed me from feeling like I was being taken for granted. Number one, a friend will always pay full price for what you have to offer. And two, friendship does not coincide with opportunity or growth that someone can provide for you. Friendship is unconditional. This is the boundary that I want to suggest to all of my female creatives. A friendship is not an opportunity. Let me repeat that. A friendship is not an opportunity. A friendship is not an entryway to a discount. Anyway, I had just lost a client, and the woman I'm referring to was also paying me basically whenever she felt she could. Her overall goal was to begin making money from her content. But in order to get these things done, guys, I also had to be compensated as my contract stated. This is where we began to butt heads because I would be working for free. We ended up doing our best to kill two birds in one stone. She paid for my travel to get me to her state. We will work through our obligations, and she will grow her presence online. My initial thinking was that our change in dynamic would bring us closer to our goal. Admittedly, I was incorrect. It turns out that her spouse had been gambling a lot of their money away, and it was eating away at her ability to pay me. In an attempt to save her connection, this overarching issue would be overshadowed by our work. In other words, instead of addressing the deeper issue, because marriage and provision was involved, it was more like, let me find someone or something else to point the finger at because I cannot exactly exercise oversight for the situation I'm in. If your husband is paying your bills and ensuring that you have a roof over your head, I can 100% understand why one would be hesitant to create upheaval. This is why I continue to remain neutral. This isn't something that I take personal until this day. However, it's important to note that despite what someone is going through, we have to be able to see things at a bird's eye level. In business, we do have to consider what's in it for us, right? At this time, this meant that either I would keep waiting for her to pay me properly or I would dissolve our agreement altogether. This client felt that by bringing me into her personal issues firsthand, that I would gladly and should gladly accept inconsistencies in pay. No entrepreneur should ever accept this behavior. I was still expected to provide deliverables despite these inconsistencies. When we were treading through the work, there were praises, applauses, and everything in between. Again, I still have the messages that pointed to her really liking what I was providing. However, when it was time to tally everything up to get her caught up on her payments, it was like something changed. This is the part where I encourage you all to not be afraid to speak up for yourself. Some people will note what happened, send it to a group of prevalent marketers, and no one will ever work with that person again. For me, I kept this to a close group of women and professionals that I admire. We discussed that this was ultimately unacceptable. Once the woman's justification for lack of payment became, "I was not satisfied with the work you did," I was confused. Because up until this point, I received nothing but positive feedback from this client. More urgently, she didn't request for us to part ways. She asked me over a call if I could quote unquote give her time to get her shit together, excuse my language, and then come back strong. Does this render an unhappy client, or would this render a client who is experiencing hardship? I know that I wouldn't want to simply pause an agreement that I'm ultimately unhappy with. This is where you have to stand on your convictions. I ended up leaving her a copy of our pay statements and highlighted where each missing payment that should have come in did not. This prompted denial, a lack of care as to how it would affect me, amongst other things. Hence, why you should learn from me and also take care of yourself first and foremost. When dealing with a difficult client, it can be hard to maintain your composure. I know it was hard for me. Listen, honey, I definitely had some choice words to say, but I always would call my girls to vent or speak my mind, and my suggestion is to find an outlet to discuss your frustrations as best as you can. Make it productive, and do your best to refrain from doing anything you wouldn't want done to you. Again, I'm very grateful for the experience because it taught me a lot. This isn't to try to paint a picture that isn't there, but the purpose is to shed light on what actually happens when we are our own bosses. We often talk about the positives, but we don't talk about the obstacles, the growing pains, and certain experiences that we may encounter. It's a different world when you are on the front lines. And one thing about it, no one is going to tell your story if you don't. No one can speak up for you louder than you. I'm sure everyone processes situations differently. She may have a different recount, who knows? All I know is that I can only speak my truth. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you guys learned something from me. Sierra out.